The riots that took place in Bengaluru in August is back in the focus now, and that's because of the kind of information and details that has emerged from the investigation so far. Now, there is a link that's been drawn to the Congress party by the crime branch that's investigating this particular case, and in this video we give you details of exactly what the Congress link is all about. Let me first take you back to August, which is when this incident happened. On August 11th, we saw violence playing out in two areas in Bengaluru. That was in DJ Halli as well as KG Halli. There were clashes that were reported between a violent mob and the police officials. It led to 3 people dying and scores of people also being injured, both Bengaluru policemen as well as people who were part of the mob. There was also widespread vandalism reported. In fact, a police station in DJ Halli was set on fire. The Pulakeshinagar MLA, his house was also attacked, allegedly torched by this violent mob. So that's the level of violence that was reported in this case. After that, since then, we've seen about 400 people being arrested for being a part in these riots, either for conspiring or for hitting the streets and resorting to violence. Now, the NIA has also become a part of the investigation because there's a suspected terror link also, questions about really how this particular violence was pre-planned and how it was funded. I'll get to that in just a bit, but let me focus for the moment on the investigation by the Central Crime Branch, because all of the talk, all of the outrage is over what has been mentioned in the preliminary charge sheet. There are 2 Congress leaders' names that have emerged. One is the former mayor of Bengaluru, who is part of the Congress, Sampath Raj, and the other is a corporator of the Congress, Abdul Rakeeb Zakir. Both of them have been named as accused number 51 and 52 in this case. You can only imagine the kind of questions the Congress is facing and the fire from opposition parties. But let me first explain to you what is the alleged role of these 2 leaders. Now, the allegation against Sampath Raj, who was formerly the mayor of Bengaluru, as I mentioned, and also against this corporator, is that both of them had conspired, instigated this violence because they wanted to hit out at the current MLA, Akhanda Srinivasamurthy. I had told you about how his house was targeted. It was, according to this charge sheet, based on what Sampath Raj as well as this corporator, Abdul Zakir, had planned. Now, why did they do this? Let me give you the details of what's mentioned in the charge sheet. According to the charge sheet, Sampath Raj wanted to contest from this seat of Pulakeshinagar, which is where Akhanda Srinivasamurthy is currently the MLA. Remember that Murthy was part of the JDS. He had defected to the Congress and so got a ticket in the 2018 Assembly elections. He has a huge support base, particularly among the Muslim vote bank as well as the Dalit vote bank in this particular area. Now, what we understand, and this is again allegations that have been put forth in the CCB, the crime branch's charge sheet, is that Sampath Raj wanted to hit back at Akhanda Srinivasamurthy and wanted to dent his support. And that's why he, as well as this corporator Abdul Rakeeb Zakir, were planning for the longest time to ensure that his popularity was dented and create some sort of a conspiracy against him. Reportedly, in the charge sheet, it mentions that Sampath Raj was planning to spread news and use the anti-CEA protests as an excuse to create a certain amount of image or a negative image with regards to Akhanda Srinivasamurthy. And this is when an alleged defamatory post was put up by Murthy's relative. So, allegedly, Sampath Raj as well as this Congress corporator decided to use this to their benefit. The evidence against them is this. According to the crime branch, Sampath Raj was in touch with SDPI activists and also instigated them to resort to this kind of violence. So, according to the officials who are investigating this case, the entire violence that we saw in Bengaluru was planned by these 2 Congress leaders. In fact, Sampath Raj's personal assistant is already been arrested. He is in the custody of the police because it was from his phone that phone calls were traced to another accused who is an SDPI activist who was a part of the mob that resorted to this widespread violence on August 11th. Now, that's not the only Congress link that's emerged. 2 other Congress leaders, that's Rizwan Arshad as well as Zamir Ahmad Khan, were also called in for questioning earlier by the NIA. While this is procedural and there are no allegations against him, all of this has put the Congress in the spotlight because there are a lot of questions being asked of whether Congress was directly involved in the violence that broke out on August 11th in Bengaluru. The BJP, of course, has lashed out at the Congress. Even former ally of the Congress, H.D. Kumaraswamy, has also questioned the party. As far as Congress is concerned, they maintain that this is a conspiracy conspiracy to malign the party, even stating that this is an attempt to divert attention from the failure of the police as well as the state government. So at this point, the Congress has refused to take action against these two Congress leaders who've been named in the charge sheet. But here's the twist. Clearly, as per the charge sheet by the Central Crime Branch, it was some sort of rivalry that led to this violence. So the MLA in question here, Akhanda Srinivasamurthy, who was targeted, who faced violence and whose house was allegedly torched, has now demanded the suspension of Sampath Raj. So there is a lot of internal revolt also that the Congress is facing. Amid this political showdown, it remains to be seen what kind of evidence the investigative agencies will be able to pull out. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, the NIA is also now looking into this riots case that is in fact getting a political turn, even as there are questions about whether this was pre-planned, whether there's a terror link also to this mob violence that happened in August.